The CEO of Palworld was the chief engineer for a company that went up in smoke along with 16 million euros in funding. How is this game legal? Was it made by AI? And is it good? All that and more. But first, there are two different versions of this game out right now, one available through the Game Pass and the other through Steam. With the Game Pass version being an earlier version, I will just be talking about the Steam version, while Pocket Pair have stated they plan on catching up the other platform. At time of writing, they have yet to do so. I saw screenshots of the leveling system and thought, oh, it's a Rust Arc clone with a Pokemon gimmick, and I wasn't particularly interested. I don't like that style of game. I don't mind playing games with heavy punishment systems. I've even played Baldur's Gate 3 on honor mode before, and lost more times than I care to admit due to my own stupid mistakes. Fair enough, if you kill me and raid my base while I'm online, sure. I'll be annoyed, but you are the better player. Well done, but I don't like the fact that I can lose all my stuff because some closet gremlin wakes up at some ungodly hours to crawl out of their gutter and raid my base. I'll pass that. But this game promised to be what Pokemon Legends of Arceus wasn't, and I've got to say, it's fun. It's important to get out of the way. I was wrong. This is a monster survival collection game first. If you have come looking for your next Rust fix, you're going to be disappointed. There is no PvP in the game currently, and while they have announced that they are going to be adding it in the future, they said they will be doing it in their own way. I mean, data miners have found something in Palworld's code called radar spheres, which would allow you to capture other people's pals, but I'm not too sure how much I believe in this, because every other aspect of this game is taken from somewhere else. Hell, the CEO of Pocket Pair did an interview with Wired Japan and said, quote, I have a deep-rooted desire for my work to be enjoyed by as many people as possible, and to that end, if there are good ideas out in the world, I'll pick them up. I don't necessarily care about originality, end quote. This basically describes the entire ethos of every game Pocket Pair has ever made. Craftopia seems to be a knockoff of Breath of the Wild, and they're working hard on a new title called Nevergrave, which looks like a knockoff Hollow Knight. But this game, I'm not sure. That's not to say they haven't stolen parts of the game, it's the fact that they've stolen so much from so many games, they've created a perpetual stew of copyright infringement. I mean, at the start of the game, you leave a ruin, you see an NPC at the right side of the hill, and in the distance you see a big tree. As you go down the hill, there is an enemy you cannot defeat yet, and you even have the same From Software stamina bar. Or when you walk into a church filled with red flowers, a statue, and a glowing thing. Definitely not Elden Ring. The movement is very similar to Breath of the Wild. The level up and research mechanics are obviously taken per arc. I mean, they are virtually the same, and for some reason they've also decided to copy the dogshit building system, which is genuinely terrible. While it is possible to build impressive structures, don't waste your time trying to build anything nice. Either go for a warehouse approach if you must contain everything, or build yourself a hut and leave all your pals outside. And those base raids, wonder where they came from? RimWorld. If you think I'm reaching, I'm not. The CEO did an interview with Automation Media and explicitly states this connection. I mean, even if you just watch the first trailer, it's understandable if you came away thinking that the game's main gimmick is just Pokemon but brutal, and even that has been done before by Peter of all people. Talking about the pals, they're obviously supposed to invoke that Pokemon feel. We'll get into the legality of that later, and I mean, they do it really well. If you told me Pocket Pair had hired an ex-Nintendo artist to design these pals, I would believe you. They have more Pokemon charm to them than some of the Pokemon games I've played. I mean, look at this guy. Look at his cute little waddle, the bouncy run. He can carry rocks on his head before stuffing him into a rocket launcher. I mean, look at Depresso. I enjoy the fact that you can look at a pal and think, I could ride that, whether it be the ones that fly, ride over the waves, or just on land. You can. I know it's not a big thing, but it's fun. There's something about sitting on top of a dinosaur and mowing down pals with your shoulder-mounted rocket launcher. I mean, it's not like a normal Pokemon game would let you pick up a Vulpix and burn down the Viridian Forest. One of my favourite games is Frostpunk. In that game, the less morals you have, the more harsher penalties you can inflict onto your colonists. for more bonuses, all to keep the secret engine alive. That game is carried by its writing and its art. It's hard to understand how much Palworld is carried by these PAL animations. You could inflict worse and worse working conditions on your PAL, but then they'll walk around with these sad little faces and they might get injuries, so you can heal them up or melt them down for bonuses. I didn't want to do that. It just felt too cruel. It's a shame that they couldn't carry that level of care over the humans, because they are just so dull and boring. I do not care if I butcher 20 people. They are so dull. The AI is terrible. They only ever say one thing. This guy might say, you know what they say, PAL tamers get stronger the more pals they capture. Go out there and catch some pals. Well, you can capture him in your legally distinct PAL ball and force him into hard labor, and then talk to him again. What will he say? The same line. It doesn't matter if the individual is a grunt, a guard, a trader. They are all so dull. I mean, look at this black market trader. Look at the setup, the winding passage, the overbearing room, the character design, only for him to be no different to a wet rag. Season 8 Game of Thrones characters are more interesting than him. If you need compelling characters or a complex plot, or really any plot, then you're going to have to keep looking, because there is none here. I enjoy the world in general. There are large swaths of land, teeming with life and action. A lot of the time, games make big maps. They just feel empty. See Starfield. There are zones which require certain equipment to enter, with regional bosses which you can fight and try and capture. There are also enemy bases filled with goons, walking around with guns which you can assault and try and claim the PAL that they have trapped within, or even challenge the towers for loot. If you want to take a break from exploring the world and go back to your base, throw a few beds down and let the PALs start gathering resources. Eventually, you can build your own resource nodes and have the fires of progress burning while your little PALs slave away on the assembly line, building that handgun ammo. And when it comes time for these PALs to do their duty and defend their home, you can have them man the battlements and fight for you, even if you can't directly control them. Unlike most titles in the Monster Collection genre, PALs don't evolve, even the ones that look like they should. I mean, these two aren't related, even though you can find them in the same arena. What this means is that if you want to increase or diversify your workforce, you'll have to breed a male and a female of the same PAL to get a copy of that PAL. However, if you breed two different PALs together, you can get a completely different PAL. And while this is based on a lot of math, you can just use this website and it will tell you exactly which PALs you need to breed in order to get what. Link in the description down below. I could spend more time talking about the gameplay in detail, but you tend to move through the different styles so quickly. One minute you have a club and then you're smacking cats, then you're harvesting fox organs for your fire arrows, only to pick that fox up and use it as a flamethrower. I may sound like I'm having a fever dream, but you do go from riding on a boar to taking pot shots off the back of a deer, firing missiles from a dinosaur. If you've played any popular survival game recently, you are going to be familiar with the mechanics. That perpetual stew of copyright infringement we were talking about earlier. I hate to say it, but I do like the game. That's not to say it's perfect. There is a plethora of bugs and issues, ranging from the helpful, like being able to reset the timer on all the foods by simply sourcing your inventory, to grappling in places for extended periods of time, but at least I don't fall through the floors like some other early access games. But one of my biggest issues with the game is the pathing of PALs, because oh my god, it is so dogshit. I would recommend keeping your base one floor. Multiple times I've had my PALs go upstairs for some reason, only to get stuck trying to access the chest on the floor below. Larger PALs have this issue much worse. They're more likely to get trapped and just start jittering. And while you can change the orientation of your base to fix it, it doesn't help that they also get stuck on trees, because all the trees and rocks respawn exactly where they are, which means you can't even clear out a section for them to move in between. This issue also persists in combat. While it's not really a big problem in the overworld, it is if you challenge the boss towers. The way combat works in this game is that an enemy will target you and then switch for your PAL, shot for shot. What this means is that if they can't hit you, they won't stop targeting you. So if you're in a boss room, you can just stand behind a pillar, as well as other standard bugs like lagging or server crashing, but those issues can be resolved going forward. At the end of the day, this game is ridiculous, but I really enjoy it. Will I put 100 hours into this game? Probably not. Would I replay it? No. But will I play it to the end? I think I will. 8 out of 10. Oh, one last thing I can't believe I forgot to mention. There's no microtransactions. Good job. But now, let's talk about the scandals. To say this game is popular is to put it lightly. They managed to sell 5 million copies in 3 days. It had a peak player count of 2 million active players on Steam. To give you some perspective, that is the highest player count ever of any paid game on Steam's history. Higher than Baldur's Gate 3, higher than Elden Ring, higher than New World. This game is breaking all of Steam's records, all while being on the Xbox Game Pass. The only game to beat it is PUBG, but that was a free-to-play game. And while Microsoft doesn't disclose their player numbers, Pocket Pair has. They put out this helpful JPEG. 19 million players since release. 12 million on Steam and another 7 on Xbox. Jesus Christ. However, with all this popularity has come more scrutiny. And while the CEO is odd, and we'll get to that, the accusations around the game don't seem to hold any water. But I'll do my best to explain them in good faith before explaining why they don't make any sense. Regardless of your thoughts on the matter, it's not appropriate. Send death threats to their artist.
Hi America, my name's David Taylor. I'm the CEO of the company that makes Tide.
Bait and switch. This isn't actually a scandal, I just wanted to talk about it. The CEO is an odd guy. His only experience in the field before founding Pocket Pair was a series of Nintendo game seminars, which seems to have crystallized as him filing for patents under Nintendo's name, being labeled as the inventor. He then goes on to work for JP Morgan. Very boring. It gets interesting again when he founds a cryptocurrency exchange where he holds an executive position as stated by leaked internal documents. They get hacked and lose 430 million euros, which has since been refunded to their customers. However, he fails to mention on his website his role as chief engineer for something called Project Spindle, a cryptocurrency investment company, which has achieved, quote, the largest ICO crypto fundraising in Japan's history. It attracted the attention of investigators, which led to the company moving to London with its 16 million euros in capital, then going up in smoke. Very odd.
Swipe or no swiping!
Setting aside the ethical conversation of using AI artwork to create content, I don't think it's true. At the very least, I haven't seen any proof of the matter. The argument seems to rest on 3 limbs. First, the CEO made a set of tweets being amazed by AI-generated Fakemon. This is true, these are the tweets. However, this is often then misconstrued that the CEO created the PAL models using AI, as well as a series of tweets in 2022 where he views AI as an inevitable development that would be useful. And while it is possible to use Spline AI to generate 3D models from text, even going so far as to generate animations and textures, the issue I have is that nothing in these tweets or tweets, I don't know, say or even hint towards AI being involved. It's a really big reach. The second limb is that Pocket Pair have previously used AI image generation in their games. This is true. They released a game called AI Art Imposter, where you and a group of friends use AI to draw an image, except one of the art pieces is done completely by AI, and you have to figure out which one of you is the imposter. So while they do have previous experience with AI, there's nothing to say that they used it in this game. The CEO has directly talked about how he hired the artist that, quote, draws most of the characters in Palworld, end quote, in a blog post, and how they didn't originally hire this artist. Only when they were rehiring for this position were they finally taken on board. But please take this with a pinch of salt, as the original blog post is in Japanese and I've had to machine translate it. It could be wrong. There's also the new Steam AI policy. Steam has updated their policy on the 10th of January 2024, which requires companies to disclose the use of AI. In fact, they have to complete a survey stating if and how AI was used and to what extent during development and execution on the game. Steam goes on to say that this information will be disclosed to the customer, so that a customer is able to make more informed choices. So it would be a bit odd that the term AI does not appear anywhere on Palworld's Steam store page or in Steam's directory. Whereas as you look at Art Imposter, it is clearly tagged with AI. Now they could be lying, but that would be a violation of Steam's AI policy, and I would think they would rather just take a set of angry tweets than risk their own game being taken down. The third limb argues that they are producing PAL models too fast. The argument comes from the blog post we were talking about earlier, which talks about the production of the game, in which they state that they can produce work 4 to 5 times faster, and therefore they must be using AI. So, while it is true that the student is working fast, if you read the full blog post, it talks about how nobody had any previous modelling experience, and that it took him 1 month to create one model, and most of the previous 3D assets from Craftopia were purchased. So the 4 to 5 times faster figure might be explained by the skill difference between a complete novice and a grad student, but nowhere in the blog post does he say how long it takes for each PAL, merely that it is fast. Again, this has been machine translated from Japanese. While there is an interesting conversation to be had about AI art, it is currently being used to bludgeon Pocket Pair. That is not to say they definitely haven't used it, but when they talk about particular PAL designs, they tend to credit the artist, and Forbes has reached out to Pocket Pair to try and get some answers, but they have yet to respond. But I haven't seen anything that would indicate AI art.
Objection!
Let's talk about the elephant in the room. These PALs look like Pokémon to an unusual degree, so much so that people have accused Pocket Pair of infringing on Nintendo's intellectual property. Advocates for the argument will say look at Grisbolt and Electabuzz, Fengalobe and Columbian, Robinquill and Decoade, and say it's obviously clear Pocket Pair are infringing on Nintendo's intellectual property. If that's not enough for you, Don McGowan, the former chief legal officer for the Pokémon company, when speaking on the game said, quote, "This looks like the usual rip-off nonsense that I would see 1,000 times a year when I was chief legal officer of Pokémon. I'm surprised that it got this far," end quote. The former doesn't really understand IP law, and while I disagree with McGowan's statement, he didn't expand on it, so I'm not entirely sure why he's reached this answer. So, is Palworld infringing? The short answer to this question is no. Do you really think Nintendo, a company that is notorious for enforcing their copyright, would heel to a Pokemon knockoff? I mean, in the YouTube space alone, they used to DMCA strike YouTubers for just playing their game. And even now, they send cease and desist letters to YouTubers like PointCrow, who made a multiplayer mod of Breath of the Wild. They would have definitely been made aware of this game's existence before its launch. If they haven't taken it down yet, it's not going to happen. If this appeal to authority and trust me bro argument isn't persuasive to you, then there is a longer and more complex answer. But it's important to disclose if you are making a Pokemon clone. I recommend you visit your local solicitor so you don't get fucked by Nintendo. It's important to state that both Pocket Pair and Nintendo are companies based in Japan, and while I'm not intimately familiar with Japanese law, nor do I speak or read the language, I do, however, have a passing familiarity with UK intellectual property law. However, I am by no means an expert. So, the UK and Japan are both members of something called the World Trade Organization, a requirement of which is to be a signatory to something called the Berne Convention, which, among other things, protects your copyright abroad. So, I would be greatly surprised if it deviates from what I'm about to set out. I'm also simplifying IP law, because that is complex and this is a YouTube video. Your IP is broken down into 6 main areas: trademark, passing off, copyright, designs, patents, and confidential information. There are more minor areas, but even out of these 6, only 2 are relevant. A copyright is the right to make a copy of something, perfect or imperfect. You can't copyright an idea, that's what patents are for. You can't claim copyright over an art style or mechanics. This is why the monster collection genre exists, because nobody owns the patent for it. If it was owned, Pokemon wouldn't own it. It would belong to Atlas, who created a Megami Tensei. But Pokemon is simply the most successful franchise in the genre. Multiple times during my review, I referred to Palworld as a perpetual stew of copyright infringement. That might be a bit hyperbolic. It's not a bad thing to copy other games. Some of the most successful games are basically clones of others. Mortal Kombat is a clone of Street Fighter. League of Legends is a clone of Dota. Both are hyper successful. Neither infringe on copyright. A more recent example is Holocure, a VTuber game that is literally a reskinned version of Vampire Survivor, and even that isn't copyright. It's also why Nexus Mods kicked the Pokémon mod off their website, because that was a clear violation of copyright. You can, however, patent mechanics. This is why the Nemesis system from Middle-earth hasn't been used again, because it was patented. However, patents aren't really relevant here, whereas trademark is literally a mark of your trade, but you do have to register. Technically you don't, but you're better off doing so. So, Nintendo, Pokémon, Pikachu are all registered trademarks. However, it's important to note that not all Pokémon are registered trademarks, so Cyndaquil isn't a registered trademark, but that doesn't mean you can make a copy of it. This is why I would be willing to bet that if you went through all the PAL and Pokémon lookalikes, none of the Pokémon counterparts would be registered trademarks, only the ones protected by copyright, meaning that Nintendo would have to prove they copied. So while I wouldn't be able to make an exact copy of Vulpix, or even an imperfect copy of Vulpix put into my own game, I am able to put a fire-based fox in without issue, because Nintendo doesn't own the patent fire-based foxes. To change mediums, if I have two pairs of books, the first pair, both books use the same story beat, that's fine. The famous example for this is the Da Vinci Code and the Holy Blood and Holy Grail. Whereas, if one was merely a copy of another, or using large chunks, then they would be in violation. This is called a derivative work. This is why Nintendo is taking action against PokéZoo, a recent Pokemon card game clone, but not Palworld. It doesn't help that if you're found not to be protecting your copyright, saying, "This is mine," then you might lose this protection. This is why Google sends people letters asking them not to use their name as a verb, because if it becomes a verb, it would fall into public domain and they would lose the protection. It's why Nintendo goes after every banned game. This leads to companies overreaching. The most ridiculous example I know of is, despite Sherlock Holmes falling into public domain long ago, the Sherlock Holmes Foundation maintains that you can't have a nice Sherlock Holmes because that characterization was only present in the later books and therefore still protected. Was unsuccessful. It gives you some idea about how far these companies try to reach. The exact line of when something is a derivative work is very fine, even with two games that look identical, as seen in Nova Productions and Mazamuma games. Nova claimed copyright protection in bitmap graphics, design notes, as well as copying 12 features of Pocket Money. The judge found that the similarities between the games were too general to amount to a substantial part of Nova's games, and that most of the similarities were a result of designers' own work. You have to be able to point to something in particular. So, Palworld is fine. None of the Pokemon they copied were trademarked. I doubt Nintendo would be able to prove that they were copied. So, why did Nintendo release a statement saying they were investigating Palworld, warning, "I have no proof for this"? But my guess is because their legal team was being inundated with the same email of people trying to bring their attention to Palworld. But with all these scandals, there has also been
chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
I've seen this Discord screenshot floating around, suggesting that the game only cost 10k to make. This is not true. The game cost approximately 1 billion yen, that is 5.3 million pounds or $6.8 million. This project was financially mismanaged. The CEO even said so, quote, "It would be impossible for a decent company to develop a game without managing the budget," end quote. He said, quote, "Pocket Pair is not a decent company," end quote. Quote, "The budget cap starts with the zero balance in your bank account. When you reach zero, you can borrow money," end quote. He said, quote, "In that case, do you need to manage your budget," end quote. This is not how most projects are organized. I've also seen these videos floating around, trying to compare how close Palworld's pals are to their respective Pokemon counterparts. Previously, the user who had created these examples had said they were exact models, only to later say when they say exact, they were being hyperbolic. While the designs do look similar, I have no experience in the 3D modeling field, so I can't tell you to what degree these models have been artificially manipulated to prove their point. It is just something to be aware of.
The conclusion is the very last paragraph of your essay.
I do like this game. I think it's fun. I can't wait to see what flavors they add to their perpetual stew of copyright theft next. If you like this video, why not hit that like and subscribe button? It really helps me out. If you're Japanese or you're more familiar with the Japanese legal system, how close was I? Will you be playing Palworld? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you.